Hey everybody, this is Jacqueline Lukman, and today is Friday, February 16th, a very eventful Friday, February 16th, in Washington, D.C., and this is an impromptu episode of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics. I'm going to be sharing this link a little bit. I'm asking you guys to please share this link a little bit because obviously we got to talk about this whole Mueller indictments that came out from the FBI. Hi, Dolores. How are you? I really want to talk about that a little bit today because I think it's important to put these indictments into some kind of context. Because if we don't, if we believe the breathless excitement that we are seeing and hearing from the media, we're going to be misled into thinking that something is happening that's really not. And we're going to completely miss the bigger picture of this whole issue of interfering in countries' democratic processes. So, while I'm sharing, I'm sharing right now to a couple of places. I'm asking you guys who are on to please share because yeah, this is a pretty important issue. We have got to talk about this, and as much as we can, we've got to get this straight because of course everybody who wants to make this about, see, I told you the Russians helped elect Donald Trump, will see only that, and everybody who wants to make this about, see, I told you the Russians were involved in losing the election for Hillary Clinton, will make this about that. And these indictments are really not about either one of those things. So let me see, let me get this out to a couple of other groups. It's great when you've got to when you're doing all this yourself, right? We're not we don't get online and spew a bunch of conspiracy theories and talk about false flags all day and you know, feed into the Alex Jones types. That's why we don't have 600 people on our streams. uh, I'm being a little petty, but you know, I think that with everything that's going on, I think I have a right to be a little petty because it's ridiculous how much misinformation people, even on the left, seem to want to receive. And it's really hard to make the case that an outside agent didn't influence people to vote one way or another when we have people on the left who believe that every horrible act is a false flag conspiracy theory. They'll believe Alex Jones types conspiracy theories in a heartbeat. So how can I reasonably say that they weren't influenced? Do you see how hard some of these people make it to defend them? They make it nearly impossible. But I don't talk about them. Let's talk about this business of these indictments. Now, today, Robert Mueller, hey Monica, hey Chanel, thanks for sharing, you guys. Today, Robert Mueller issued all of these indictments, 13 indictments against 13 individual Russian people, right? There's no indication that the Russian government was involved. The indictments don't name the Russian government. There's no indication of a connection between these 13 people and the Russian government or Vladimir Putin. There's also no indication in these indictments that the people that these Russian so-called agents, these so-called Russian agents, interacted with were aware that there were Russian agents. There were no indications that the people they interacted with were staff members on Trump's campaign. None of the people they interacted with were people involved in Bernie Sanders' campaign. None of the people they interacted with were people who were involved in Jill Stein's campaign. These indictments do not name anyone that was involved in any of the major political campaigns from the last election. All right, that those things are not in this indictment. And I'm gonna take a sip of tea and let y'all breathe, because I'm gonna try to go through this a little bit with a little bit. I'm gonna try to pace myself through this, because I'm pissed off at a lot of things that's going on. The mass shooter and the conspiracy, well, the terrorist, let me call him what he is, the terrorist, and the conspiracy theories floating around about him, and people not just calling white male supremacist violence in America leading to this what it is. I'm pissed off about that. I'm pissed off about people calling people who are legal gun owners and who've never shot anybody in their life and who are advocates of stricter gun control laws. I'm tired of people calling those people gun nuts. I'm tired of people who do not see the need for some stricter enforcement and some further regulation of laws. I'm tired of white people being angry at black people because we are happy about the Black Panther movie. There are people on Twitter right now. I said I was going to take a sip of tea. Okay. There are people on Twitter right now who are posting fake pictures of white women with bruises, saying that these white women have been beaten by black people at the opening showings of Black Panther. Completely fabricated, completely made up, just absolute bull. I'm pissed off at that. And then these indictments come out, and people are all of the pro Hillary people, all of the pro the Democrats are saying, see, we told you so. And there's nothing in these indictments that point to I told you so. All right, another sip of tea and let's get into this. So, this is according to The Guardian, and I'm going to share my screen here so you can see this. The Guardian says, is reporting on these indictments, 13 Russians criminally charged with interfering in the U.S. election. Mueller announces some highlights, and yes, I'm going to give you the link to this document. There are 13 Russians and 3 Russian entities, including a state-backed troll farm that was involved in basically setting up social media accounts. And that's it. That's pretty much it. Setting up social media accounts and maybe organizing some protests. The 37-page indictment alleged that the Russians' operations included supporting the presidential campaign of then candidate Donald Trump and disparaging Hillary Clinton. However, these are the things that were actually committed, actually alleged to have been committed by these 13 Russian actors. The Russians allegedly posed as Americans to operate bogus social media accounts, buy advertisements, and stage political rallies. They stole the identities of real people in the U.S. to post online and built computer systems in the U.S. to hide the Russian origin of their activity. That's it. that's all that these Russian actors ultimately are charged with doing. The charges date back to 2014. The charges are formally that these people conspired to defraud the United States by impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful functions of government. I have to oops, sorry. I need to pause right there. Nobody could do a better job of defrauding the legal actions of this government than this government has done. No one could have done a better job of defrauding the legal process and outcomes of a democratic election than the Democratic Party itself did, and the media being complicit with them. Because see, none of this would be an issue. We wouldn't even have a thing called Russiagate were it not for the Democratic Party's strategy to stack the deck in favor of their presumed nominee before the primaries even happened. If it were not the Democratic Party's strategy to actively impede the campaign of Bernie Sanders, and if the media had not been complicit in doing that, in blacking out any coverage of his rallies and his campaign speeches, and for giving Donald Trump all of this media, free media that he got instead of Bernie Sanders, we wouldn't even have this issue. If it were not the Democratic Party's strategy to elevate the three worst Republican nominees for the Republican candidacy for president, one of those nominees was Donald Trump. I think the other was Ted Cruz, and I can't remember which of the other horrible people it was. But it was the Democratic Party's strategy to elevate the three worst Republican candidates, Trump being one of them, in order to stack the deck in favor of their presumed nominee, because the thinking was, well, these people are so horrible, nobody in their right mind would vote for them. So we will prop up these three horrible candidates. One of them will make it through, and their horribleness will be so repellent to Americans that those people who were on the fence about voting for Hillary will see the horrible alternative in any one of these people, and they'll vote for Hillary, and she'll be even more of a shoe-in. But it backfired. And it backfired because the American people actually began to look into Hillary Clinton's actual record. Not just look into it, but those of us who are old enough to have been around during Clinton's presidency, her husband's presidency, and during her tenure as Secretary of State, we remember the horrible policies she was involved in. Many of those policies having to do with interfering in the democratic processes and governments of other countries that have led to failed states, that are failed states today. No one could have done a better job of interfering in or defrauding the democratic process, or access to the democratic process, or influencing the outcome of a democratic process better than the Democratic Party did itself. No one. The Russians didn't influence our knowledge of what the Democratic Party did and who Hillary Clinton was as a politician. So let's go back. Let me read you some more of this document. Oh, I keep giving you two of myself. So let's go on to look at some of the specific things that were alleged these people were alleged to have done. Events were organized by Russians posing as Trump supporters and as groups opposed to Trump, such as Black Lives Matter, according to prosecutors. One advertisement shortly before the election promoted the Green Party candidate Jill Stein, who was blamed by some Clinton backers for splitting the anti-Trump vote, which is garbage. Garbage. Because the Green Party got less than 3% of the overall vote. The Libertarians actually got a larger percentage of votes than the Green Party did. So the Green Party didn't split anybody's vote, and neither did Libertarians. People just did not like Hillary Clinton because they knew who she was, and they did not like her. And almost 30% of the registered Democrats didn't even bother to vote. But this indictment, these charges in this indictment really only serve to further discredit third-party candidates and supporters. That's really all these charges do. All right, so let's go down a little further. This one really pissed me off. The Russians are also accused of working to suppress turnout among ethnic minority voters. They allegedly created an Instagram account posing as woke blacks and railed against the notion that African Americans should choose Clinton as the lesser two evils against Trump. Let me tell you why that makes me so incredibly angry. Russian agents, 13 Russian agents, did not suppress the black vote in this country. 13 Russian agents with some Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts did not keep black people from going to the polls. Gerrymandering did that. Voter ID restrictions did that. Disenfranchisement of formerly incarcerated people by refusing to restore their right to vote did that. Closing polling stations in poor neighborhoods did that. And while we like to attribute those policies only to Republicans, the fact of the matter is Democrats have been pretty damn spineless in standing up for us against them. Because where Democrats are concerned, they demand that black voters support them in the elections, but when it comes to us demanding that the Democratic Party push for policies that directly address issues that affect black people, we're told we can't ask for anything. We're told that politicians are politicians for all people. We can't just do things for black people, but every other group of people gets to demand from the Democratic Party what their group of people want and need. But we're told we can't. We can't have our issues addressed. So if black people stayed away from the polls this past November, it was because of a combination of things that the two political parties in this country and this system have done to us. Not the Russians, with some Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts. Please. Don't be ridiculous. And these are things that black people have been telling this country about this system and politics in relation to black people for decades. Decades. But with this issue, with these indictments and these allegations in this indictment that charge 13 Russians with suppressing voter turnout, this completely washes away all of that we have endured under Republicans and Democrats in this country in suppressing the black vote and ignoring black issues for the past 50, 70, 100 years. Because too many people are too invested in conspiracy theories and proving that Hillary Clinton was robbed of an election by the Russians, and it was the Russians who got Trump elected instead of the Democrats' horrible, horrible strategy and the willful disenfranchisement of American voters by the American political system. This one paragraph in these indictments, and every instance where they mention how these 13 Russian agents posed as a Black Lives Matter group, all that does is serve to discredit all of the work black activists have been doing to enfranchise our people in this system that has been oppressing us, suppressing our vote, ignoring us, and pushing us to the side long before the 2016 elections, or long before 2014, when they mention in these indictments the first incidences of this so-called interference happened. It also says in the indictments that in early November 16, according to the indictment, the Russian operatives used bogus United Muslims of America social media accounts to claim that American Muslims are boycotting the elections today. I mean, that would actually be valid if Muslims actually boycotted the elections, but there is no indication that that actually happened. But you see, people are looking, and they're going to look at these indictments, and they're going to say, see, we told you there was Russian interference. We told you the Russians were involved in getting Trump elected. But the very same indictments make it clear that there was no evidence and there's no mention in the indictments that anything these 13 people did affected the outcome of the elections. The very indictments that claim these 13 people created all these false social media accounts and organized these rallies, stealing U.S. identities, supposedly to influence people's opinions and influence their votes, these 13 masterminds. But the very same announcement for the indictments says that nothing these people did actually influenced the outcome of the elections. So why are you issuing indictments for interfering in an election when there was no actual impact on the outcome? Now, for all the conspiracy theorists out there, you want to talk about a false flag? This is one. This is one of those things where I am absolutely believing that this is just another attempt by the government. This is an attempt by the government at obfuscating the facts of what happened in the 2016 election. This is one of those times where you can assign a plot, a nefarious plot to this. Because all of the criticism that we have levied against the American political system and how corrupt it has been for quite some time gets washed away and covered over with this indictment of 13 Russian agents who set up some Twitter and some Facebook and some Instagram accounts. Another thing it also washes away, another thing this indictment also just completely obfuscates is the history, the very long and disgusting history of United States interference in other countries' elections. See, the reason I never believed this whole Russiagate bullshit from the beginning is because I know that the United States is better at interfering in other countries' elections than any other country on the planet, because we are the biggest on the block. We're the biggest bully on the block. We've got the most resources. Because our media is owned by corporate entities now that are the media extensions of the two political parties, of course they're not going to talk about this history of U.S. interference in the elections and the government processes of other countries. But that's why we're here. That's what we've been talking about for the past 2 years on social media. But for some of us, we've been talking about it for a much longer time than 2 years ago. Many of us have been talking about it all our lives. But if you want to talk about interfering in other countries' elections, okay, let's talk about how the U.S. is no stranger to interfering in the elections of other countries. This is from the Los Angeles Times, December of last year. The CIA, of course, was accusing Russia. The intelligence community was accusing Russia in interfering in the 2016 election. These 13 indictments are supposed to be proof of this, right? Yeah, the problem is what these 13 people are charged with doing is nothing compared to what the United States has actually done. The United States has a long history of attempting to influence presidential elections in other countries. It's done so as many as 81 times between 1946 and 2000, according to a database amassed by political scientist Dov Levin of Carnegie Mellon University. Now, that number, 81 times that the U.S. has tried to influence presidential elections in other countries, does not include military coups and regime change efforts following elections of candidates the U.S. didn't like, notably in Iran, Guatemala, and Chile. Nor does it include general assistance with the electoral process, such as election monitoring, because nobody can track that stuff. We find out about those kinds of things long after the government declassifies the documents from the intelligence agencies that carry out these regime changes and the military coups. So let's get into some of the ways, some of the times in which the United States interfered in another country's election or democratic process. In 59 of these cases, the side that received assistance from us came to power, although Levin estimates the average effect of partisan electoral interventions to be only about 3% increase, to only about a 3% increase in vote share. Again, remember, this doesn't include regime change and military coups. It's true that the U.S. hasn't been the only one trying to intervene in other countries' elections. Yes, Russia has attempted to sway 36 foreign elections from the end of World War II to the turn of the century, but nobody's got anything on the United States with trying to do this 81 times. Italy's 1948 general election is an example, an early example, of how a race where U.S. actions probably influenced the outcome. We threw everything, including the kitchen sink, at helping the Christian Democrats beat the communists in Italy, including covertly delivering bags of money to covering campaign expenses, sending experts to help run the campaign, subsidizing pork projects like land reclamation, and threatening publicly to end U.S. aid to Italy if the communists were elected. Levin said that U.S. intervention probably played an important role in preventing a Communist Party victory, not just in 1948, but in 7 subsequent Italian elections. Throughout the Cold War, U.S. involvement in foreign elections was mainly motivated by the goal of containing communism. The U.S. didn't want to see left-wing governments elected, so it did engage fairly often in trying to influence elections in other countries. Like in 1990, in Nicaragua, the CIA leaked damaging information on alleged corruption by Marxist Sandinistas to German newspapers. The opposition used the reports against the Sandinista candidate, Daniel Ortega. He lost to opposition candidate Violeta Chamorro. In Czechoslovakia the same year, the U.S. provided training and campaign funding to Václav Havel's party and its Slovak affiliate as they planned for the country's first democratic election after its transition away from communism. In Haiti, after the 1986 overthrow of dictator and U.S. ally Jean-Claude Baby Doc Duvalier, Baby Doc Duvalier was a monster in Haiti. But the U.S. loved him because he looked favorably upon U.S. financial and business interests in Haiti. He was a disaster for the people of Haiti. But the CIA sought to support particular candidates and undermine Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who the Haitian people loved, a Roman Catholic priest and proponent of liberation theology. That's black liberation theology. And this is important in the history of Haiti, as Haiti was the only slave rebellion that resulted in not just the defeat of 3 major European armies, but in the creation of a sovereign nation state. And the Haitian rebellion sent shockwaves throughout the Western slaveholding world at the time and influenced policy in how slaveholders and slave owners dealt with their enslaved populations. The Fugitive Slave Act that was passed in the United States was a direct result of the Haitian Revolution. And it was enacted to ensure that a Haitian revolution did not happen here. The New York Times reported in the 1990s that the CIA had on its payroll members of the military junta that would ultimately unseat Aristide after he was democratically elected in a landslide over Marc Bazin, a former World Bank official and finance minister favored by the U.S. These 13 Russian people set up some social media accounts and planned a couple of rallies. The United States actually had military members on its payroll in Haiti who helped overthrow a democratically elected leader in that country. The U.S. also attempted to sway Russian elections. Oh, and we all know that the Clinton Foundation and their nefarious connection with Haiti today. All right, we talked about that quite a bit in the elections, in the past election. The U.S. also attempted to sway Russian elections. Now, this actually was not an attempt to sway Russian elections. They actually did it. We actually influenced the outcome of the 1996 elections in Russia. With the presidency of Boris Yeltsin and the Russian economy flailing, President Clinton endorsed a $10.2 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund linked to privatization, trade liberalization, and other measures that would move Russia toward a capitalist economy, neoliberalism. The United States government, under President Clinton, with the help of the International Monetary Fund, paid for neoliberal policies to be implemented in Russia under Boris Yeltsin. Yeltsin used the loan to bolster his popular support, telling voters that only he had the reformist credentials to secure such loans. According to media reports at the Times, he used the money in part for social spending before the election, including payment of back wages and pensions. But here's some more information about what we really did in Russia. This is from The Guardian, another article from The Guardian from Owen Jones. If you have a chance to check out his YouTube videos, they're very, very good. He's very well versed on neoliberalism, and he's pretty entertaining too. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Right here. Here's what really happened. Here's what the United States really did in interfering in the Russian election in 1996. As soon as Bill Clinton assumed the White House in 93, his experts discussed formulating a policy of American tutelage, including unabashed partisan support for President Boris Yeltsin. Political missionaries and evangelists, usually called advisors, spread across Russia in the early and mid-90s. Many were funded by the U.S. government. Brzezinski, the former national security advisor, talked of Russia increasingly passing into de facto Western receivership. Now here the FBI is issuing 13 indictments for Russians who came here, stole some identities. That's a crime. That's fine. They should be indicted for that. Stole some identities, but saying that they conspired to defraud the U.S. of democratic processes by setting up some social media accounts. And in 1993, we actually sent people to Russia. To advise the Russian government on how to sway the Russian people who were at this point hating Boris Yeltsin and wanted to get rid of him into what a good guy he really was. But the results were, to put it mildly, disastrous. Between 1990 and 1994, life expectancy for Russian men and women fell from 64 and 74 years, respectively, to 58 and 71 years. The surge in mortality was beyond the peacetime experience of industrialized countries. While it was boom time for the new oligarchs, something we helped install in Russia, poverty and unemployment surged. If we had been paying attention to what the United States was doing in Russia in 1993, we would have seen what was coming here. Prices were hiked dramatically, communities were devastated by deindustrialization, and social protections were stripped away. To the horror of the West, Yeltsin's popularity nosedived to the point where a communist triumph in the 1996 presidential elections could not be ruled out. Yeltsin then turned to the oligarchs, using their vast resources to run an unscrupulous campaign. It was a momentous event that undermined a fragile democracy and led to the emergence of Vladimir Putin's dictatorial regime. It is even alleged that in 2011, Putin's key ally, then President Dmitry Medvedev, privately suggested that the election was rigged. Of course, I am going to give you a link to those documents, but this is why on Coffee Current Events and Politics and on Brick by Brick and everything else we do in Luke Mon Nation, we say that history is important. Because if anybody had paid any attention to what the United States has been doing in other countries before this election, no one would have bought this Russian meddling bullshit. No one would have bought it. If we had actually been a country that had been well versed on the foreign policies of our own government. But instead, what has happened is we're in a situation now where we're playing catch up. We're playing catch up, trying to cram 50, 70 years of destructive foreign policy into our sudden outrage that we just learned about in 2016. And because it's so overwhelming to us and we don't know how to parse it out and we don't have the attention span to sit there and read through material and get involved in discussion and actually learn and understand the history, we don't want to learn what really happened. We'd rather listen to conspiracy theorists. But see, none of this is a conspiracy. It really wasn't even done in secret. They weren't trying to cover up anything. They weren't doing one thing. Our government here wasn't doing one thing to hide something else. They were really literally out in the open, overtly, intentionally trying to influence elections in other countries. And they did it. But if those of us on the left, if we newly woke, those among us who weren't involved in politics before, if we had just paid attention before now to all of the people, Black people, Native people, Latinos, the disabled, who have been telling you, yelling and screaming, the white poor, that this government is not your friend. This government isn't a democracy. These politicians don't care about you. They are only in this to make money. If you had listened to us before, you wouldn't be sitting here now wondering who's telling you the truth. We've been telling you that these people have been lying to you all along. And with these 13 indictments, they're still lying. These indictments, I don't know whether these people can be prosecuted in an American court. I would guess. I'm not a lawyer. Maybe that's something I can get a Noah on to talk about because she is an attorney. But I don't know. Maybe these people can be prosecuted for identity theft. That is a crime. Maybe they can be prosecuted for I don't know, wire fraud. Maybe if there was some money involved. But the FBI itself makes it clear that nothing these people did actually influenced the outcome of the election. But people aren't going to pay attention to that. People are going to pay attention to the fact that they created a fake profile and spread some information calling themselves Black Lives Matter. And they're going to use that to continue to dismiss the fight for justice of Black activists. And they're going to use it especially to dismiss Black activists trying to hold the Democratic Party especially accountable for the policies they don't advocate for Black voters they demand should vote for them. They're going to use these indictments as a way to dismiss valid criticism of Democratic candidates with ties to corporate entities that don't care about you and me. They're going to use these indictments to coronate Hillary Clinton all over again and to declare her clean and innocent, even though nothing these people actually did influenced the outcome of the election, and even though none of the information these people shared, as limited as it was, none of the information these people shared was actually untrue. That's the other aspect of these indictments that I don't see. There's nothing in these indictments saying that the information these people shared was false. The information that was shared was information you and I and everybody else we know who have been parsing out the track record of Clinton and Trump and Rubio and Sanders and Stein and all of these people. We've been talking about their record for years. These people, what information they shared on social media, they shared the same information that you and I have been talking about. So, as far as committing a crime, especially the crime of defrauding the U.S. of government of process, where is that? Where did they do it? I don't see it in this indictment. I don't see that in these indictments. They didn't lie about the information they shared. Yes, they stole people's identities. They should be prosecuted for that. But they set up some social media accounts and they shared some information that other people were sharing from other places that were not Russian. And all of it was true. So it's really disturbing to me that right now these indictments will do more to harm the true democratic process in this country, and that is the mobilization of grassroots activism. And it's especially that these indictments are especially going to be used to harm Black activists. These indictments are especially going to be used to harm third-party advocates. I mean, they named Jill Stein here, and they're just going to use this to drag her through the mud again. And this is just the latest iteration of what W.E.B. Du Bois said this two-party system does to discourage dissent and to discourage third parties from ever becoming viable. We mention this essay all the time. W.E.B. Du Bois' essay in 1956 entitled, "I Will Not Vote." And he lists all of the presidential elections he voted in since he was legally allowed to vote. And he voted for Republicans and he voted for Democrats. And he listed all of the promises that these politicians made to Black voters. And all of the times those promises were not kept. He also listed all of the times politicians didn't even bother saying they were going to do anything for Black voters. He talked about how he would love to vote for a third-party candidate, but the two-party system pushes out the voices of two-party candidates so that their messages can't be heard by the majority of the voting populace. This was in 1956 that W.E.B. Du Bois wrote this essay. The same thing was going on then that is going on now. These indictments are just another extension of what Du Bois was talking about when he said in 1956, "I won't vote." All these indictments will serve to do is to continue to legitimize the current two-party system, to further entrench the oligarchy, which has been a staple in this country since the 1900s, to further silence dissent, and to give people who are invested in the two-party system and who are too afraid to look outside of it, to give them ammunition to silence our voices. That's what these indictments will do. I don't know that, like I said, that anybody can actually be prosecuted for setting up some fake social media accounts in the American court of law. But I do know that right now, as a Black activist, as a Black voter, I'm really, really angry at so many different groups of people. I'm angry at progressives on the left, at progressives who have hitched their wagon to racists because they want Medicare for all so bad. And instead of listening to and working with black people who want the same thing, they'd rather work with members of the alt-right and people who want an ethno-state and silence black voices because talking about black issues is divisive. I'm pissed off at y'all. Because those people who did that, they've got 500, 600 people spreading their Alex Jones cockamamie conspiracy theory bullshit, and these people don't actually talk about history, what really happened, like we do. I'm pissed off at the Democratic Party for taking black voters for granted, for propping up candidates who destroyed our communities and destroyed our lives, and we couldn't even get an apology from people like Hillary Clinton until we badgered her for 10 years about her campaigning for the crime bill. At the very least I can say about Bernie Sanders, when we confronted him about that, he said, "You're right, I shouldn't have voted for it. This is why I voted for it, for a very specific reason, for a very specific funding, for a very specific program, but it was a horrible program." And at the very least I can say about Sanders, he made the impassioned case for not passing that bill in a much worse iteration than it was at the time. But at least he owned up to his shit. We couldn't get Hillary Clinton to own up for her super predator insult for 10 years. And she wouldn't own up to it until she ran for president. And she needed to apologize for it, because the optics wouldn't have looked right if she didn't. I'm angry. I am angry. I am angry at people who refuse to listen to black voices in the struggle for justice in this country. I am angry that black people can't even be excited about a fucking movie without white people diminishing that. I am angry that we cannot have our show and talk about black issues without non-black people coming onto our page telling us who we should vote for and what we should be telling people. Don't listen to anything we say about why we feel the way we do. I am angry at not being heard by the people who make the decisions and by the people who have the ability to push change in this country. I'm angry that now that lower income white people are struggling financially, now they want to change the system. But for 50, 80 years that blacks and Latinos have been on the bottom of the income scale in this country, and not because we're lazy, but because that's the way the system was built. When we've been telling white people the system is unfair, and you've got to see this inequality, and you've got to think there's something wrong with us, you've got to help us, those were the people who said, no, it's because you're lazy. If you just work hard and follow the rules. But now the very same people who worked hard and follow the rules, they're not as comfortable as they were as recently as 2009 now. Now you see there's a problem in the system. And now you want our help, but you still don't want to listen to us. I'm mad as hell at that. I'm mad as hell that once again, black people are being thrown under the bus of this political system in order to save face for a candidate that threw black people under the bus in order to get votes from moderate Republicans. I expect I expect these indictments to result in a whole lot of I told you so's and, you know, the vindication of Hillary Clinton. I bet you somebody's going to write an article and actually title it The Vindication of Hillary Clinton. I would not be surprised. And all of the actual issues that we brought up about not just Hillary Clinton, but about U.S. imperialism and the interference in other countries' elections and democratic processes and governments that has destroyed countries that we've been talking about for the past decades. It's all gonna be swept away by these useless 13 fucking indictments. I don't even know what to do anymore. Right this very moment, I am just so that's why all of that is why these indictments are not only really suspect to me, but they literally mean nothing. Nothing in the grand scheme of why and how Donald Trump became president, why and how Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election. These 13 people didn't cause either to happen. And nothing in these indictments, nothing in these indictments suggest that they did. But that is not going to stop people from using these useless 13 indictments as a justification to continue to support a very flawed system that serves no one but the people who fund it, the people who profit from it. So those are my initial thoughts. We'll see what happens in the coming days. We'll keep you posted. We'll probably talk about this again. But right now, I just don't have a lot more faith to keep. So I can't even tell you to keep the faith. Join us Sunday night when we will be live at 6:30, I think. Maybe we'll be in a better frame of mind. I don't know. But until then, above all else, be really good to each other. Peace.